What's going on, everybody? It's Alex Driskell again from Sweet Georgia Sports coming at you today, talking about arguably the best team in all of college football right now, the Georgia Bulldogs. And joining me today is none other than Redcoat Marching Band member and Sweet Georgia Sports own AJ Merritt. AJ, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Alex. Go Dogs.
Alrighty, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say go Dogs since I'm an Auburn fan, but I mean, say it with all the pride you want, because Georgia again is 6-0. They're off to their first 6-0 start since 2005, and we all know that year Georgia ended up winning the SEC. And to get to that 6-0 start, they just absolutely continued to roll as they rolled over Vanderbilt yesterday, as they took home a 45-14 victory. AJ, talk about that for me.
Definitely, Alex. You just said it. Georgia defeated Vanderbilt 45-14 yesterday, and basically a home game for Georgia. If you watch the game, there was basically a sea of red across that stadium, which was just awesome to see. And Nashville's only a few hours away from Athens, so it's not too surprising that Georgia Bulldog Nation traveled that well. But anyways, getting to the game, the rushing effort from Georgia's offense was fantastic today, and albeit Vanderbilt's defense, in terms of rushing, is just atrocious. Georgia still was able to rush for 423 yards, I believe, and 4 touchdowns, which is just outstanding given that Georgia runs a pro-style offense for the most part. Sony Michel put in a good effort with a 150-yard performance, and Nick Chubb also put in 138 yards. And moving on to Jake Fromm, who, again, continued to show good signs of development. He threw for 102 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and had a QBR of 87.5.
Yeah, I mean, that offense just was clicking on all cylinders yesterday, especially the running game, because you said it, they put up 423 on the ground, although Vandy does have a very, very weak run defense. I mean, anytime you can put up 423 against any school, you're having a great day. And I know you mentioned Nick Chubb there, and interesting little stat for Nick Chubb, he, during the Vandy game, eclipsed the 4,000 career rushing yard mark. AJ, I know you are a huge Nick Chubb fan. Talk about that and what it means for Nick Chubb.
Well, this is definitely a big step for Nick Chubb, and just, any running back in general. If you look at the stats, Nick Chubb is just the 8th SEC player to reach 4,000 career rushing yards, and just the second Georgia Bulldog to do so. And I know most of you won't be able to guess who the first one was. It was, in case you didn't know, it was a guy named Herschel Walker, which I know not many people have heard about.
Yeah, it's just Herschel Walker. Nobody knows who that guy is.
Yeah, just, arguably one of the best college football players to ever play the game. But it's just some nobody. But anyways, this is a big step for Nick Chubb. I remember watching him suffer that just nasty injury against Tennessee 2 years ago. And just to see him come back to be the player that he is today, it's really awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Nick Chubb fan, even though I'm a diehard Auburn fan. I absolutely love Nick Chubb and his work ethic and how he's worked his way back since that Tennessee injury and just a couple other injuries he's had as well. He's just been a little bit injury prone, getting nicked up here and there, and of course going back to that gruesome injury against Tennessee a couple years ago. And in 2017, he's looking every bit of the player that he was coming out of high school, just like an every down back, a guy that can do everything, that can run the outside and then just punish you up the middle. And I just really, really like Nick Chubb and how he complements that offense that's a run-first offense, a ball control offense, and that just does its job. And speaking of doing their job, I mean, Jake Fromm and the job he's doing for that Georgia offense is as a true freshman is just absolutely amazing. I mean, he stepped in as Jacob Eason got hurt, and since then he's just been on fire in this offense. I mean, Saturday he was 7 for 11 for 102 in the air, and then 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And for the year, Jake Fromm is, he has 836 yards through the air, 10 touchdowns and 2 picks. So he's doing his job in this offense, just being very efficient as well as not turning the ball over. And that's something I want to talk about is this offense, AJ, and just how it just it's not like an Auburn offense or just this high powered offense like an Auburn or an Oklahoma State per se. Just talk about the offense and how it just complements this whole Georgia team.
Well, Alec, you were talking about it before we started this, and you were talking about just the ball control offense. Jake Fromm isn't asked to do much. But when Jake Fromm does, when his number is called, he really exceeds expectations. This guy is a true freshman who was kind of thrown into the fire when Jacob Eason got injured, albeit against App State, who we ended up beating by 3 touchdowns. But still, Jake Fromm, throughout each game since his first start at Notre Dame in a pretty hostile environment, he's progressively gotten better and better, and he's giving me, a fan, more confidence, and he's giving the team around him more confidence. And that to me is what is making him such a great leader, despite being only 18 years old. It's just this guy is my age, he's our age, and he's commanding football players in an SEC offense. It's just insane to me.
Yeah.
And that one thing I want to point out, he only has 2 interceptions on the year, which I think is a big mark, I guess, for this offense, because Jake Fromm, he's not asked to do much. He just needs to limit turnovers and throw the ball enough to keep the offense honest, and he's doing an exceptional job at that, and he can only get better. Of course, we still have defenses like Auburn and Florida to play, but I expect Fromm to just keep getting better.
Yeah, I mean, he's not asked to do much. I mean, this offense really reminds me of kind of like a pre-Lane Kiffin Alabama offense when they had Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier as the offensive coordinators, who both have moved on to Florida, with Jim McElwain being the head coach and Nussmeier as the offensive coordinator, where it was just a one-back system. When I say a one-back system, I mean through the formations, obviously Georgia uses their running backs like nobody's business. I mean, they have 4 or 5 guys. They're 4 or 5 deep within the running backs. But when I say one-back system, I mean with the formations like single-back ace formations, shotgun formations with one running back, with Jake Fromm there. But I really, really like this offense, not because of the fact that they put up a lot of points or whatever. They just do their job, which is to eat up time and eat up yards and go on long drives and give that amazing defense a rest. I mean, we were talking beforehand, before we started, that Georgia is tied for 4th with like 16 different teams in time of possession. They're tied for 4th. And they just do their job each day, or each game, week in, week out, and just keep that defense off the field. That way they can rest. And speaking of the defense, they are arguably the best defense in the nation. AJ, just go ahead and give us the lowdown on this defense.
Well, to start off, Alex, I just want to point out that I've been watching Georgia football basically my whole life, and this is the best Georgia defense I have seen play for the Red and Black. So far this season, Georgia's defense ranks 2nd in the FBS in scoring defense and 3rd in total defense, which is just insane to me. And you mentioned it earlier, we're tied for 4th with a handful of other schools in time of possession, which I think is a huge stat, considering the fact that this means that Georgia's defense isn't on the field as much as a lot of defenses in the country are. And given how deep Georgia's defense is, that only adds more to the argument. I think another big indicator to point out is that Georgia ranks in the top 5 in the FBS in rushing defense, which, as a Georgia fan, Georgia hasn't always been that rushing defense anchor, as you would say. They've never really been elite in that area, but this year Kirby Smart has definitely changed that. He's putting a lot of big guys up front. Our linebacking core is amongst the best in the nation, and I think that's really contributing to our success so far.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that defense is just flying around, making plays. They've been great on the ground as well as great in the air. And that's the thing I really, really like about Georgia's defense is, one, they're very, very deep, which you always need. They're very deep at every position. But also, they're also extremely versatile. I know the base is like a base 3-4 defense, kind of like what Alabama does. But then when you play teams that spread you out and go to the spread, like Sanford has, like Notre Dame has, They usually switch to like a nickel defense, like a 4-2-5, and just some teams when they switch a defense, when they switch their base defense, when they go from like a 3-4 to a nickel defense, like a 4-2-5, it's almost like a night and day difference. But with Georgia, it's just the same guys on the field making the same plays, and they're just fantastic right now. And as an Auburn fan, I'm kind of concerned come November that we won't be able to move the ball against Georgia's defense just because they are that good. And so looking ahead for Georgia, they have Florida coming up. They're going to finish out their SEC schedule. They have Auburn, and then they finish up with Georgia Tech. So AJ, just give me what your expectations are for Georgia going into the second half.
Well, my expectations, I might be a little biased, so I'll try and keep this as objective as possible, but I honestly see Georgia winning out the rest of their schedule. Now, the most losable game for us would obviously be Auburn, in my opinion. If both teams do what they're expected to do, this should be possibly a top 7 matchup. You know, if Auburn continues to climb up the poll slowly and more slowly like they have been, I definitely see this as a college game day type game. I think this is going to be one of the better games of the year just because Georgia-Auburn has always been like that. Games have always been pretty close. Now, Georgia, if we win out and let's say we lose to Auburn for some reason, we're still going to make the SEC championship. Our playoff hopes just might be hindered. Now, if we finish undefeated and say keep a close game with Alabama, I think there's a small chance that we could still make the playoff. It's unlikely, but I think Georgia, they control their own destiny at this point. If they keep doing what they've been doing, they're definitely going to be in the playoff. I think they can definitely hang with Alabama. I think they can hang with any team in the top 10. I'm very confident in this Georgia team, and I would not be surprised if we won out.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised if y'all went out either. I mean, y'all look absolutely amazing. You could make the argument that Georgia should be ranked number 3 ahead of Penn State, but it's still up for debate, and none of it really matters until the first playoff rankings come out, and I believe those come out like last week of October, first week of November. So we'll see as we get there. Georgia looks absolutely amazing right now. They could possibly win out. Again, you mentioned the Auburn game that could be losable. I mean, they're playing in Auburn, hostile environment. And then if they win out, they go to the SEC championship against Alabama. And we all know about Alabama. So, I mean, with Georgia going forward, they look very, very good. They have playoff aspirations. They have SEC championship aspirations. And so just keep an eye out on Georgia. They are one of the hottest teams in all of college football. And so for AJ Merritt, I've been Alex Driskell saying goodbye. And I'm not going to say go Dogs. So, AJ, you can end us with a good old good Dogs.
All right, we'll do. Go Dogs.
All righty. See y'all next time, sweet Georgia sports fans.